Welcome to the Body Bag Podcast. I'm your host, Broke Rider Dave, and with me as always, Chris Thomas.
What's good, everybody?
And this week we are going international as we have our guest all the way from Ireland, Jamie Stewart.
Hi.
How you doing today there? What time is it over there in Ireland?
It's 7:10 at night.
Oh, okay. We're just getting the day kind of started over here.
Yeah, it's 10 past 1 here.
And am I your first international?
Yes, I'm going to try to do everything I can not to embarrass America in this thing.
Right? Yeah.
As a pseudo ambassador kind of esque right now, I'm going to try to do everything I can to make us come off somewhat like we know what we're talking about over here.
But yeah,
we're not as crazy as it looks, I swear.
We promise we're not the crazy ones. Yeah.
Well, you saying that to an Irishman.
Fair enough.
All right. So, Jamie, you sent us an advanced copy of your new book.
Yeah.
You want to talk about it a little bit?
Absolutely, sure.
This is coming out in November, am I correct?
November 13th.
November 13th. I Hear the Clattering of Keys.
I'm excited for it. Excited to push it for you. Hopefully help you get some sales here in the States.
Fingers crossed. That'd be lovely. So it'd be.
All right. So the very first story in the book is called Dead Air.
Yeah.
All right. It seems like that story is about loss and mistakes coming back to haunt you.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that story? Like, what's the process for that one?
What did you lose?
Nothing that severe. It's one of those what if questions. The idea came when I was leaving the gym and I jumped in my car and the radio, which I don't really use much radio, I was always on Bluetooth for Spotify, was between stations. So you got this really garbled kind of communication going on between two radio stations talking at once, and it was very low volume. And it just got me thinking about long haul truckers and CB radios and what would happen, because they're very isolated. If you imagine driving down the dark roads at night, you're in your cab, and it's a wintry kind of blustery thing. And at the time we were living in Scotland, and we lived at the very north of Scotland. So there's only one road that connects Inverness, where we used to live, to the rest of the UK. And up there, it's like Canada. It doesn't really feel like the UK. It's just massive, glens and forests and lochs and stuff. So it's very isolated. So imagine this guy.
Right.
It is beautiful. It is beautiful. I think it's one of the most beautiful parts of the world, actually. But fortunately, I don't live there anymore. But I just conjured that mind. I said, what would happen if a voice spoke to you from the radio, a voice you knew that was someone who had died? And that was coupled with an idea I'd always wanted, or I'd recently read a short story by Ray Bradbury called The Emissary.
I just started listening to a lot of Ray Bradbury, actually.
What ones are you listening to? What collection are you?
It was a collection. It's on YouTube, actually, where he has a lot of his audiobook collections.
Mm-hmm.
The last one that I listened to was Cold Call Collect, I believe.
Okay.
He's got so many. I haven't read that one.
It's kind of like what you were talking about, hearing the voice of a loved one. This one was all about a man who had been abandoned on a planet for 80 plus years, and then he hears a recording of his younger self talking to him, and he basically drives himself crazy listening to stuff that he recorded like 60 years ago, talking to himself 60 years in the future. It's weird and crazy, like Ray Bradbury can do.
That's I imagine that's affected by the isolation. If you never talk to someone in about 80 years and the only person is your previous voice, you get irritated at him too.
Oh yeah, he gets pissed at himself.
But The Emissary is part of the October Country collection, and I found each story in that had a particular moment in it where the story would flip. So you would be transported to this sort of idea. The Emissary is a very beautiful story. It's about a young boy who can't go outside because of illness, and he has a dog that goes out, and because the dog comes back and brings all the scent of the surrounding town, he's like he's outside, and the dog's called the Emissary. And he also had a teacher who was very lovely to him and kind to him, and she unfortunately passed away very young. And the end of that story ends in the final sentence: the dog has disappeared for some time and finally returns, and he returns with the dead body of the former teacher, but the dead body is now a zombie, or what you're led to believe is a zombie. So this beautiful luscious tale with beautiful descriptive language just turns on its head and flips, and you get the sort of devastating end and then cut short. And I loved the idea of that. So when I wrote Dead Air, I wanted to have that as sort of flipped. So the Dead Air plays with the trope of somebody coming back to sort of teach you a lesson. And, your life's maybe gone a bit away. It's a bit like It's Wonderful Life. You get an angel and they come and they sort of look, if you do these things, you'll fix yourself. You'll fix and your life will turn around. And that's what the main protagonist, the truck driver Carl, believes is going to happen. But doesn't.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of inverting that in a way.
Okay.
Very nice. I like that.
Yeah, I like that. So I Hear the Clattering of the Keys is the main title and also the title of the last story.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that title, and what was the inspiration behind it?
Well, the collection is kind of like an end of an era for me, because I started doing self-published stories and on Amazon in 2019, and I'd never written short stories consistently before. I'd always focused on novels. So that year I started to write short stories, because every time I published one, people were like, this is fantastic, and they would tell me stuff they didn't like and stuff they did like, and I would try and change my writing style and stuff and develop my storytelling ability to write the next story better. So I was inundated by ideas. I was just sort of struck with sort of inspiration for all these ideas. And I kept hearing the sound when I was like in work or something of a typewriter being hit, because I felt like my mind was at such a rush with sort of like, oh, this story goes to that, or this idea goes to this thing, or this character is going to be in this story. It was kind of like my head was like ready to explode with all this. And I really was begrudging the time spending away from my laptop writing it, which is in the story. The story of Clattering the Keys is about a young woman who wants to be a writer, but work life, love life takes her away from what she wants to do. And she feels like she's stuck in this rut where she wants to do it, but she's not doing it. And she has an Instagram account and she uses it to promote her stuff, but she feels now kind of like a fraud because she's promoting things she doesn't actually write. She'll sit and take a picture and say, I wrote a story today, and she didn't. And she encounters this typewriter that gives her this sort of affects her in the same way I was feeling. In fact, that the sound of the keys are in her head, makes her approach it and makes her, sit down and actually commit herself to the task. But it costs. There's a price with it.
Does this typewriter exist? Because
I don't own a typewriter.
I could use that right now, because I have a hard time sitting down and committing myself to writing.
Yeah.
I haven't had a typewriter since middle school.
It's based on the idea of the description of it is based on Ian Fleming's Royal, which he had a gold one, but it's in the story it's black. But I love a typewriter. I love how they look, and it was just sort of this idea that I'm going into a job that's 37 plus a week. Hours a week, and I've got a family life, and I've got a married life and all this stuff, and I have all these ideas and they're sitting ready to come out of my head, and I'm frustrated about not being able to write them down. And I'd finished a big novel. I'd finished like a 400-page novel, and that was the first thing that I decided to write, was I Hear the Clattering of the Keys after it, because it was a bit like Stephen King writes novels and then he says he's just got enough steam left after writing a big project to do like a short story or novella. And I kind of was in that position where I was really hyped up, and that's what came out.
Speaking of which, I took your advice, by the way, and took to starting to write down instead of going on a laptop and typing out these ideas.
Yeah,
it's a lot better. Getting your raw ideas down. It's a lot better. So,
do you not find that's how you started when you started to write? You were pen and paper. That's how you started. And
I started writing when I was in middle school, and that's all I had. I would do it during class, and that's all I had was a pen and paper.
Yeah, and there's something raw about that. There's something sort of you can't edit. Laptop makes you sort of go back and read over what you've just written, and then the edit button comes in, and you maybe written only 500 words. But if you do it handwritten, you find there's about 2,000 words just come out, because it's just sort of you flow to it, is easy to capture.
Plus, when you go back and look and you see page after page and after page, and you see little sub notes and things crossed out, you get that feeling like, wow, some real work went into this. Look at all the stuff the little mini notes that they put.
Yeah.
Dave, if you don't mind, can I have a question that kind of bounces off of what you asked?
Yeah, go for it.
So Haley and Spencer that we had on the show earlier.
Mm-hmm.
With Haley, her books delved into psychology, specifically children's psychology and serial killer psychology. And Spencer talked about his past depression and how that influenced his writing, as well as fear of the unknown, which played a big part in his writing.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a common theme that you find yourself drawn to when you write your stories? Something that you continually revisit, whether intentionally or not?
Technology sucks.
I can agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't intend to be that way, because I very much use technology as much as anyone else, but I just find there's a common, it's not intentional, and it's certainly not on the top of the stories. The stories, the main theme of them is not about it, but I find a lot of the stories have sort of irksome kind of takes on the digital age and the fact that we're all connected and all this stuff, and there's something missing. I'm 31 years old. I grew up as maybe one of the last generations that didn't have a phone permanently glued into their hand. Mm-hmm. So I know what it was like to have a childhood without that. I just find, I'm just curious. I'm very interested in seeing the effect of, when video games came out back in the 80s and stuff, not everyone could afford them and things like that. So it wasn't something you can measure, but this is all consuming. This is, our mobile phones and, internet has consumed our culture. So I'm interested to see how it has effect. I'm someone who still collects vinyl and someone who still listens to CDs and a CD player, and I think there's a lot of valuable time, something valuable about spending the time just doing one thing, going to the cinema, not going on your phone, listen to a record, listen to it from the end to from the beginning to the end, not having any other distractions, not trying to balance your, bank account or do some insurance or something, or look up some supermodel on your phone at the same time. I think it takes a lot of weight off your mind existing in one sort of universe, and that's it. So I find there's a lot of that in my writing unintentionally.
It does feel like with technology, we take a step forward, but then two steps back socially.
Yeah.
Definitely agree with that one.
We use the CDs. I remember back when having a portable CD player was like the pinnacle of having I felt like so not sophisticated, but advanced. I was like, there is no way that technology is going to get better than this.
Yes.
No, I was there too. I had one too. I actually went on a school trip to France with all my CD collection in a backpack. No clothes. Just the CD collection.
And you have to risk like it skipping every time that you hit a bump or if you turn it the wrong way.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But then because of that, like I got into the Red Hot Chili Peppers By the Way album, but I got into like one song, but because I had the only thing to do was listen to that one CD again and again, I ended up getting into the rest of the songs, so there's not the need for this instant hit, that we have now, where it's just a single. There's no point in releasing an album. Basically, it's all filler because nobody tries on them because nobody listens anymore. But I contend that music is not something that it immediately sparks. Not everything immediately sparks with you. Sometimes a song takes a bit of time for a bit of time for yourself to appreciate, and that's what that old technology afforded you to do. Now we just sort of, if we don't like something, we skip over it, and maybe that something could have meant something to us if we'd taken the time.
So this actually leads into one of the questions I have, because in the Beach House you mentioned singing "Mr. Brightside" by the Killers.
Great
song, by
great
the way.
song.
What type of music do you listen to, and like how's it influence your writing?
Everything. I used to listen to music a lot when I wrote, but I don't do that anymore. I prefer silence. But no, it's massive influence on me. Bob Dylan. I encountered Bob Dylan at 18, and the fact that his lyrical ability was a big effect on my writing because it made me want to try to incorporate that. And the way he writes songs, he pictures them. You can just picture everything he's saying. So it sort of made me elevate what songwriting could be. So I very much think it's connected to storytelling.
I like that.
The trick I tried to do with the Beach House was write a story as short as I could with the most effect as I could, and putting a song like that, you're just instantly taken back to that time period.
Yeah. So one of the last questions I have for you is, who inspired you to get into the horror genre?
No one.
Are you just drawn to it?
Well, I started writing before I started reading, and the stories I just started writing were scary ones. I was a big fan of the Resident Evil franchise, the game franchise. My friend had a copy of a couple of the games, and we would play them. And he had also a big stack of Goosebumps books on his bookshelf, and he never read them. He's a collector, but he's like not a hoarder, but he's one of those ones that would collect figurines and never take them out of the box. He would never.
Well, you can't. It'll lose its collector's value if you take it out of its box.
Yeah.
But so he had all these pristine Goosebumps books on the shelf, and I would maybe take one down and read it, and I would become enthralled with the idea that because at the time maybe I was 8 or 9, everything I'd seen was adults. In cinema and stuff like that, and there's adult stories and things. But the idea that Dracula could haunt a 12-year-old or 11-year-old, or you could find the zombies overtaking your town and stuff, and you are responsible with taking care of it, and you're whatever age. That intrigued me, so that's where I started to write, was because I could put my friends into my own stories, and that's what kicked it off, really. And
just as a side question, did you have a favorite Goosebumps book story?
I get the title wrong. It's based on the Body Snatchers. but I think it's Body Squashers or something like that.
Body Squashers.
Okay, yeah.
I was always into the choose your own adventure ones.
Yes,
Those
they
are
were
good.
good too. They were great too. That was so
Yeah.
clever an idea. I love the whole idea, which is actually something we're going to talk about tonight with Shaun of the Dead, because the World's End is very much like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, in that you go back to a place you know and everyone is slightly different and slightly weird.
That one I saw was the only. No, I saw Hot Fuzz in theaters too, but I remember seeing at World's End, and it, especially the ending, really hit me in the feels in a kind of way.
Yeah.
When Simon Pegg was having this breakdown at the end.
Oh yeah.
That we'll talk about it then, but that made me feel emotional too, because I could totally relate to what he. But we'll talk about that when it comes time.
Yeah. But that I always loved that trope of the idea of like people you know in your life, you know, your neighbors, your friends, and stuff. Then there's something off about them. There's something different, and it's due to the supernatural thing. And they're not quite evil. They're not quite murderous, but they're just something off. And I find that very attractive. So, and I've always wanted to write a story sort of like that, but until this day I haven't written one good enough for me to release, but hopefully someday.
There's still time.
Yeah, you still got time.
Unless the zombie apocalypse happens tomorrow. So.
Yeah. Well, we're prepared for that. Played enough video games to prepare for that.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Is it going my way now, Dave?
Yep, you're up.
All right. So you're not only an author, but you were also co-editor for Welcome to the Funhouse.
Yes.
Can you tell me what it was like being a co-editor, or what goes into being a co-editor for, that was a core collection?
Yeah, that was an amazing experience. I was co-editor with Kelly Brocklehurst, who's lovely, and we have very similar ideas about what we wanted. It came about completely out of the blue. We were in contact with Nick Harper, who has come out now as being Jay Alexander, that's his real name, and he was sort of, I don't know what to do for a summer anthology, because the summer is kind of, how do you find a theme? We could go for like campground horror, and me and Kelly, my novel that I was talking about there is actually a carnival novel, so I'd come off that and I said, what about carnivals for a summer story sort of thing? And Kelly had an idea for a short story that she was working on, and we just had the same thing at the same time and sent the same message into him at once, because it was group chat, and we didn't do it in such a way that we were like, we're gonna run this thing. We did it because I had another wee short story that I'd been thinking about for years that I'd love to write, which became No Strings, which is in the collection. And I just wanted the sort of somebody to give me the kick in the butt to actually sit me down in the seat and write the story that I'd had for years. It was one of those things where like, sounds really good in my head, but I have not yet to commit it to paper. So Nick said, look, I'm busy. Why don't you, if you two are fine working together, run it. So we did. And it was absolutely brilliant experience. You learn a lot from it because you're on the other side of the glass. You're having to turn good stories down and brilliant stories down. And as someone who's, had his fair share of rejections, it was quite eye-opening. So it was in terms of sort of, just because you get a rejection does not mean your story is bad or that your story is poorly written or anything. And we tried to, reach out to those authors, and we reached out to many of them to tell them that, it just didn't fit with our collection. And that was a great learning experience for myself.
That was kind of going to go into another question I was going to ask, is how do you give that kind of criticism to an author? Because one of the things I hate having to judge other people's works, because I know how hard it is to complete something. Mm-hmm. So do you give them feedback, or do you just say, this isn't what we're looking for? How do you give...
We tried to give feedback, but we got close to 100 submissions. You
can only have so many. I can understand that.
It's the time. We had a set date that this had to be done before the publication date. We had to be finished with our stuff before Jay could take over and do his final kind of read through of it all and make sure it was fine and get the cover done and stuff. So we couldn't obviously tell everyone an in-depth kind of analysis of their short story. Sometimes just the story doesn't work for you, might work for yourself, might work for it just doesn't, but that's fine. We're the ones picking them. So, and we kind of went at the collection like making an album, in that we wanted the stories to kind of flow, not all in the way that they would all be similar, but the way the album has dips and rises, and it has an A side and a B side. So we kind of wanted the reader to go on a certain journey that would have moments of heartfelt emotion, moments of tenderness, moments of humor, moments of very dark spookiness and creepiness, and even some gruesomeness. We wanted all of those things. So you're trying to hit all those bases. And when you get a really, really great story, like, for example, Spencer Hamilton's, story, which is at the end. Like when we got that, we're like, that's the end story. That's the perfect story for an ending because it's such finality in that own story within itself. Mm-hmm. So it worked very well for our collection to have it be at the end. And our stories were up for grabs. If we hadn't written good enough, Jay was going to tell us it's not in it. So we had to work. It was quite stressful in that for writing our own stuff. And it was quite stressful telling someone no, as it always is. But we tried to say to many of them, like, there's nothing wrong with your story. It's just, it's not what we're looking for now. And that can be kind of seen as like bland, but it really is the case. And I think we were very friendly. It's really strange. A lot of the people that we turned down, I end up actually becoming very friendly with afterwards. Mm-hmm. So like Thomas Bloom and Michael Goodwin, I think I rejected the stories that they had submitted, or we rejected them. But I'm best friends with them now. And
Gloom is actually our guest next week.
Yeah, next week we got him on. Yeah.
What is he talking about?
I just got a message that we'll be doing John Carpenter's Halloween.
Oh, we're doing the Halloween? Right. It was going to be between that and The Fog.
Yeah, he loves that one.
We keep tiptoeing around The Fog. This is the second time we've had The Fog kind of mentioned. I might have that as my own pick at some point because that's a really good movie. It's a fun movie.
I haven't seen The Fog now.
It's pretty good.
I haven't seen it either, so
it's mist-esque. It's about a fog that comes in and there's creatures in the mist or in the fog. So you've done not only novels but anthology series. Do you find it easier to finish a big project like a novel or to I was gonna say, or to get a bunch of smaller stories out?
Smaller stories on their own are delightful and fun.
But to complete an anthology, do you give yourself like, I'm going to write X amount of stories in this amount of time to complete this anthology, or do you just write and then go, all right, that seems like enough?
I certainly do. Like, I've got an idea. I've got 12 handwritten stories for my next collection, which I hope to release 2 years from now. And I already have a title permanently set in my mind. So it's going to be called Something Wicked, Something Dark.
Something Wicked, Something Dark.
Yeah,
I like that.
Okay. My titles always seem so pretentious. I always have like those one-word titles. I can't. It just seems very pretentious to me. Like, wow, that sounds so deep. It's just the one titled word.
I would love to be able to do that. I find my like, I Hear the Clattering of the Keys and Other Fever Dreams. It's such a long.
I like. I would prefer to have a longer title in my head. I don't know, for just some reason, it's like one word just comes to mind, but it just seems like, I don't know.
Well, it makes sense too.
Yeah, it answers the question. You don't really know until the stories are done, because like there was 2 stories in 2019 that were started and I just petered out. They weren't good and I just threw them to the wayside. And but if I had written them, I would probably have been thinking about putting them in the collection that's currently coming out. But I wanted the current one to be kind of not slight. It's 7 stories, which is not a big number, but some of them are very long. If you've read them yourself, I think The Woman Under the White Tree is 16,000 words, which I think 4,000 words a novella. So it is. So, my short stories don't tend to be very short. They tend to, because I like the idea of giving a reader a journey. Like my primary interest is character, and I want each character to stand out, and I want you to go on a journey with a character. And normally that takes a little bit more than just sort of like a slasher kind of, the kind of action scenes, action beats that you would get. So it does. So I like to build up characters and get you sort of familiarizing with them as a reader and empathizing with them, and then I want to turn them a little on the head.
That's all the questions I have for you, but I'm sure I'll stay in touch because right now I'm in the middle of Insular.
I really enjoyed that one.
No spoilers. I'm about a third of the way through it, so
yeah, it's really good.
I tend to jump around because that's why I love short story anthologies. I can read them in no particular order.
Yeah,
and usually I end up reading the first one last or somewhere near last. So I'll probably end up reading I Hear the Clattering of the Keys next after Insular, and then eventually make my way to Dead Air, which was Dead Air the first one?
Yeah.
Dead Air was the first one, yeah.
I think it's Dead Air and then Trick or Treat. So those will probably be my last ones. But
it's really nice to hear, David, that you like Insular, because that is the oldest one and it was written in 2014 and it has not changed in any way since it was written. It was the story that started me writing short stories.
So these stories were years in the making.
Yeah, it was written. Insular was written in 2 months in 2014. I was writing a novel at the time and I was really annoyed with it. And I got this idea when I was reaching for I used to do the job that the main character in Insular does, which is working home shopping.
Yeah.
And I was reaching for a carton of milk to put into someone's shopping basket that we would eventually deliver to their house. And I thought, what happens if, I'm probably on security camera right now, but what happened if the security guard looking through the security system could see through me? And that just started it off. It was the idea of sort of like a modern ghost story set in a supermarket, which I really liked. And it consumed me. And I'd been reading a lot of fiction at the time that was first person. And I loved the quality of the language that first person gives you, because you're sort of connected to the character really quickly because you're inside his head and it's like they're speaking to you. So I really wanted to explore that. So I did. And so it's great to hear that you liked it, because it's old.
Yeah, I'm liking it so far as well. So yeah. I'm going to finish it up after we're finished recording. But before we move on to our movie review, is there anything else that you would want to say in regards to your work, and possibly just tell the people where they can find you and maybe where they can pick up your books?
No problem. So my book, my first collection, is coming out on November 13th. It'll be available from the Blood Rights Horror website as they are publishing it, and also on Amazon. I have another self-published novel called Mr. Jones on Amazon as well, which is not a horror novel. It's a coming-of-age novel set in Northern Ireland. And people can find me on Instagram at jamie.stewart.33. So they can. I don't have a website. I don't believe in websites at this moment in time, because I feel like there's so many indie authors, there's so many authors in general, there's so many websites, newsletters, and all these things. I feel like nobody has the time to actually involve themselves in them. So I just have my Instagram and I promote myself through that, and that's it. And I seem to be okay.
That's so right. I think it was a month ago that I said I was going to start working on our website, Dave, and I haven't touched it since.
Yeah, eventually we'll get there.
At some point.
I'm technophobe. I'm a big technophobe. The thought of
I'm a very old-fashioned kind of like do stuff the old way kind of person. My laptop right now is sitting on a record player right now. So
nice.
But anyway, it was a pleasure promoting this book, and
thank you for giving me the time taking the time to read it. And
it was a joy to read.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. Good.
So I guess it's safe to say that you're a Edgar Wright fan there, Jamie. I can see you jumping for glee over there.
Well, as much as it was fun talking about my books, I'm here to talk about Edgar Wright. And
so there's no real need for me to ask, because every week I ask, so what made you choose? I don't think I need to ask you. You are obviously an Edgar Wright fan and a Shaun of the Dead fan.
I would say he's my favorite director, yeah. I would.
He's a good pick.
Yeah.
Have you seen Last Night in Soho yet?
No, just out today. Going to go see it on Tuesday. Over here.
I thought you were going to say, so if we could get this interview hurried up and finished, I want to go ahead and go see it, please. But
I know Glenn Wolfe is seeing it right now, because he put it on his Instagram that he's got a cinema ticket, and I sent him a message saying I hate you.
That's another reason why that's another reason to hate technology, is that it gives spoilers no matter where you go.
Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah. It's so hard to watch. You sort of have to watch them now. Like any Avengers film or a Marvel film, I like the Marvel series. You have to watch it in the day because you're inundated with leaks.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
So I'm going to give you a choice here, because the way we're starting to do it now is we're just going to go through the movie bit by bit and talk about it. Instead of giving a quick synopsis, we'll just start talking about it, and then as the movie progresses. So seeing as how you're a fan, would you like to get us kicked off and start talking about what the movie is and how it starts, and we'll just start commenting on it as the story progresses?
Well, I can take you to the very beginning. The Universal logo starts, and the soundtrack in the background is the same thing I think they used from one of the Romero films, which is a hint back to the inspiration that caused the film in the first place.
So already we're just the movie starts out with a reference and a homage already.
Yeah, and I find it quite creepy.
That's why I said this movie should be called Callback the Movie, just because there's so many callbacks. Like within the movie itself, you'll see the same joke like an hour later into the movie, like, oh, they mentioned that like 50 minutes ago.
Yeah. Like the morning scene where he walks and gets his Diet Coke.
Oh, I love long tracking shots.
Right.
Yeah.
So we start off with Shaun and his girlfriend at the bar.
Yeah, and his sort of sterile kind of look into the camera, and it's sort of, which is really funny because the whole send up of the film is that we've already turned into zombies, and it's really not it's before the stage where we've already mentioned technology, where technology has actually turned us into zombies, where, you know, you're sitting looking at this beautiful sunset, or you're at a beautiful sunset or something like that, but you're on your phone, you know.
That was definitely a theme throughout the thing of who are the real zombies, but they're actually the people.
Yeah, straight away, you know, you're not getting the regular sort of film you would expect to see. I was intrigued by this film by the trailer, by the 5-second trailer that showed you the car, the red Renault, reversing up. The window opens and he says, "Are you okay?" And it's the dead man on the ground, and the dead man moves, and it's a zombie, and you're like, "Oh, thank God for that." And they drive off. You know, that's why I wanted to watch this film, and I took my dad to see it, and I was 14, and that was the kind of unusual thing about Shaun of the Dead. Shaun of the Dead was the first film that I recommended to him, because he always recommended things to me, and he turned to me about 10 minutes into this film with all the swearing. And said, "What the fuck have you taken me to?"
I remember when the commercials came out for this in 2000. What was it? 2004.
Yeah.
And I remember the commercials coming up and thinking to myself the exact same thing. I was like, I've never seen a comedy like this before, or the way this is advertised. As it looks hilarious, but there's something different about this. I think this was actually the first like rated R British like movie that I remember seeing, because I think the most I had seen, because I would have been like 12 or 13 at that point. So my experience with movies from like the UK would have probably been Harry Potter, Darby O'Gill, and The Borrowers. So
I think this is my first UK film I've seen was Shaun of the Dead.
Really?
Yeah.
But that's a good one to start off in. It's all low head.
Because I'm not a big Harry Potter fan, so I never watched any of those.
Well, Sorcerer's Stone just came out like a year or two before this.
It's weird the way you're saying, you know, English film, British film, because, you know, they were Warner Brothers productions. You know, they're a big American. They just had a British cast, but, you know, which I find very funny.
But then I started getting more into then I learned who like Danny Boyle was, and then 28 Days Later, and well, maybe not British films, but films set in the UK is what I should have said.
Well, this sort of film, you know, a zombie comedy, zombie romantic comedy, kicked off a kind of genre that didn't really exist. I mean, everything, the zombie theater, the zombie sort of thing was coming back with 28 Days Later, and Dawn of the Dead had been released, but they were very, very serious. And the zombie part of Shaun of the Dead is serious, but the humor comes from the fact that it's two guys that are complete slackers and stoners. Like, for much of it is a slacker comedy in the same way that Kevin Smith's, you know, Clerks is, because the characters in it are not...
You're right, they are kind of similar like that.
Yeah.
I never put that together.
Yeah, they're not like muscle men that have like an arsenal of weapons. It's not Arnold Schwarzenegger taking on the zombie apocalypse. It's your guy who's got a stoner friend. He lives in his apartment, and he wants to be a stoner and his aspirations in life is just to be at the pub having a drink.
One is short and stocky, and the other one is like tall and lanky.
Yeah, they're not your regular sort of heroes, but they are your everyday people, and that's the interesting thing about it, is their reactions to it. Like, we're not saying the Z word
because it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So just keeping along with the story, Shaun and his girlfriend just breaks up because he can't get his. Well, no, breakup comes later. They're on the verge of a breakup at this point.
But she's tired of being at the pub every day.
With his friend Ed, but she also brought her two friends. I forget the girl's name that was her friend.
David and Diane.
Yeah, Diane and David, who's a complete twat, and
ruins my name.
Yeah, nobody likes David.
Soils my good name.
He goes to his regular 9-to-5 job, which is at an appliance store.
Yes.
And at this point, let's go ahead and talk about what he needs to get in his life together. He can't make time for his girlfriend. He refuses to tell his best friend Nick. Well, Nick is Nick Frost is the actor. I always call them by their actor names. Ed. His best friend Ed is a slacker, and everybody thinks that he's holding him back, which in retro he kind of is, because well, it's not necessarily his friend is holding him back. It's just that Shaun refuses to.
He's committed to him in a certain degree, and he doesn't realize that it's kind of toxic.
In a way, it's not really Ned holding him back. It's Shaun holding himself back for not setting boundaries where he needs to.
Yeah. But the interesting thing about the film is, if you jump to the ending, which I'm not going to spoil, but nothing much changes. You know,
that's what I loved about it, is that at the very end, there's no real happy ending, and the ending is kind of like, I don't know how to feel about this.
Yeah, in some ways, it's just that his character is called Liz. Sort of has an appreciation for him because she's aware that he can do these things, but he doesn't necessarily do them all the time.
But he can't rise to the occasion.
He has that thing where everybody can see the potential, but he can't really see it in himself.
Yeah, and he has a lot of issues with his mom and his stepdad.
Oh, his stepdad played by Bill Nye, which I loved Bill Nye in this.
Bill Nye is incredible, and that's the first time I've ever encountered Bill Nye, and it was also the first time I've ever encountered, like, Ed's character is so rough. Like, the first line of his appearance in the film is just so rough, and it just sort of catches you that this is, is this even funny to laugh at, because it's so...
I remember being 13 and finding him hilarious, and then I was rewatching it again last night, and I was like, he's not as funny with the farting and the just obscenities when they're on a date kind of thing.
No, it's just sort of immature, and he's at a certain level that he never grew up at. And it's a brilliant sort of, like, there's a wee bit of shaved hair on the side of his face where he tried to shave his head and then didn't go through with it, and apparently that was intentional. He did it himself. Nick Frost did that to himself. I love this film. I think it's a brilliant film. It's also, it's slacker, but it's also kind of nerdy. So the two characters, Simon and Nick, have that sort of, or Sean and Ed have that sort of nerdy feel, pop culture reference. They're sitting playing video games.
If I ever write a comedy, I want to write something at least half as funny as that record throwing scene.
Yeah,
that was great.
When they're going through the records, like, the Batman soundtrack, throw it. Prince, no, definitely not.
Purple Rain, I like it.
I like it. What was it, Sade or something?
Sade,
like, Liz.
That was Liz. Yeah, but she did dump you.
She did dump you. All right, so we don't want to give. That's what I was going to say at the very beginning, because I want to go through. I want to go through all of this movie. But at the same time, I don't want to give spoilers because it's such a great movie, and I don't want to risk people not going to see it. But the long story of it, or the long,
I feel like
the short
if they haven't seen it yet, like, it's 17 years old, so
yeah,
everyone should have probably seen it already.
So we'll talk spoilers, but the general synopsis is that the zombies come. They go to the Winchester, which is the bar that they've always gone to, like, every single night, which Liz hates at this point because I'm sure the Winchester is very much a metaphor of
basically
where people go to die.
Yeah, they go to vegetate.
Quite literally, that's where the dead go.
Yeah,
and that's where a lot of the main characters get offed. Can Sean save his family and everybody and be the hero?
The big question.
I love the part when they're on their way to the Winchesters and they run into the other group. I'm like, what's your plan? We're going to the Winchester.
And they're
good luck.
Oh man.
Yeah, they actually have a legitimate plan. It's like this, the idea of, like, they've run into another movie, and the movie actually is without comedy. So they're taking it seriously, and they're like, we're doing this properly. We're going to survive this, and we're just heading to the pub to have a couple of pints and a toasty out back. But no, it sets it up from the beginning because there's sort of heavy overtones. The beginning at the bar where he has a discussion with his girlfriend where they're on verge of breaking up, and he sort of pulls it back. There's the emphasis of Ghost Town music, which is used in the background for the specials, and there's all this sort of, like, next time I see, there's a kid in the street that kicks a football at him and he says, "You're dead."
I mean, now that's funny because that line in a regular, like, if it was a regular horror movie, a generic zombie movie, I hate lines like that because it's like, oh, okay, yes, the obvious foreshadowing, yes, you're dead, they're going to be zombies. But this is a comedy. I imagine it was making fun of that.
I also love how he had, like, the kind of like the Halloween thing where he sees a zombie before anything happens, and all the buses go by and then the zombie's gone.
Yes, eat the bird, and there's people falling down, and sort of like, and it's very sort of, it's interesting to watch out. Obviously we watched it recently, but watch it in the face of the pandemic, and everyone's on buses and everyone's coughing in it, and you're just kind of thinking,
we were so naive back then.
Right.
Yeah.
And I like looking at these movies with a more critical eye now, like that you notice things that you don't, even to the characters. When they ran into that other group, I didn't know that was Martin Freeman in the group.
Yeah.
That was playing his friend's boy, the counterpart to Liz.
I think everyone in that group, apart from Matt Lucas at the end, is in a lot of the other stuff. The other, it's like Spaced and World's End and Hot Fuzz. They're all sort of regulars that come back, which is quite fun. So it is. So It's a great film. I love that tracking. So you get the 2 tracking shots that we've already mentioned, but Shaun goes out. It shows you the sort of zombification of his life, where he trips over the same thing and doesn't notice anyone about himself. Gets a drink from the
point
thing.
where the actual apocalypse is happening around him, and he just doesn't realize it.
Yeah.
And he does it hungover the next day, which I suppose is the reason why we're supposed to believe he doesn't notice is that there's people lying on the street dead, and there's zombies, and there's bloody handprints on the glass and stuff.
Did you think about that after watching that? Did you think, what do I do like unconsciously that I'm not even aware that I do that same thing like every single time? That if one thing were to change, it would just like throw me off balance.
Right.
That's the unique thing about Shaun of the Dead. I think, Dawn of the Dead, 28 Days Later, they're big action films that have come out in the recent times with this, but they're big blockbusters. But Shaun of the Dead put zombies right at your home, and the assessment that these 2 characters are kind of just sort of everyday people you can kind of recognize, and maybe you're not those people, but you have impulses. You'd love to spend all day off playing video games, and it sort of made you sort of imagine, especially when I was a teenager, when I first came upon the film, what would I do in the face of a zombie apocalypse? Where would it go? Who would
it would probably work out just as well. Like I can save everybody, and then literally everybody who you're trying to save ends up dying because you couldn't keep it all together.
Yeah. And even when so they do the whole tracking shot of him coming back into the house, and he still doesn't recognize anything. And then there's a girl in the garden. And again,
girl in the garden.
Yeah, girl in the garden. And it's even when they're face to face with this person who's zombified, they
just think she's still drunk.
Because that's what they associate themselves with being, and it probably doesn't work now. I would love to see someone who, like a younger person who, because the joke that they make with the Kodak camera, which you have to wind up to take a picture of, I would love to see if that joke makes any sense to someone now, because they take a picture of.
They would probably pull their phone out. It would probably then be pulling the phone out. Quick question. So, how much time passes, in your opinion, before your ex is on their own in a zombie apocalypse? How much time after a breakup would you be like, all right, they're on their own? I know we just broke up.
You wouldn't go after them, in other words.
No, you wouldn't go after them. That you'd be like, because they did just break up.
They broke up, but
how much time has to pass before you're like, all right, you know what? We were together, but that was such and such time ago. They're on their own. I can't go after them.
I don't know, a week.
And I just realized from the moment that they broke up to the very end of the movie, that all took place in 24 hours.
Yeah.
I didn't realize until I was watching. I was like, because it feels like it happened over the course of a couple of days from the breakup into that, but no, him breaking up and the zombie apocalypse happening, and then everything that happens was all in 24 hours.
Yeah. But because it works on the level of a rom-com, it just happens to have zombies in it. Their breakup, you're ultimately in the rom-com theme, you're expecting him to eventually do something to prove himself of worth, to get her back. So it makes sense that, I'm just going to prove myself of worth by surviving the zombie apocalypse with you. That's just sort of the way.
If your relationship is on the outs, just wait for the apocalypse to happen, and it does wonders for your relationship.
Well, yes. Well, we had the pandemic, and we were all forced to live with each other, and maybe some people didn't survive that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. If anything, people got more sick of each other than anything.
Yeah. But that is the thing. Like, if you were holed up in a pub with people and you're constantly drinking pints and eating peanuts, you'd eventually get tired of people.
Sounds nice in theory, but
dietary-wise,
2 or 3 you're over it. Yeah.
The name of the Winchester. I periodically go visit my sister who lives further up north, and to get there, I have to pass by an exit called Winchester, and that's always been a joke between me and her because we love Shaun of the Dead, and every time we pass, we go to the Winchester.
Have either of you two read the autobiographies by Sean Pegg or Simon Pegg or Nick Frost?
No, I didn't know they had one.
They both have separate ones, and they have an interesting thing. It just takes up to the sort of time where they're getting famous. And there's an interesting sort of thing about the Shaun of the Dead film is that they were living the life of Shaun and Ed back then, and they were sort of afraid that would just keep going, that they would just become Shaun and Ed and just stay every night in the same pub.
Was this their first movie?
This was their first movie. They had a TV show before that called Spaced with Edgar Wright, which I had watched, but I never at the time thought that they were connected to each other. And Spaced has a zombie episode in it, so it does. I'd highly recommend watching it. So the whole thing's fantastic. It's a British TV show, so it's only like 7 episodes each season. There's only 2 seasons.
Since we're diving into Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg and Nick Frost in general, we have to talk a little bit about Hot Fuzz and At World's End a little bit now.
Yeah, I'd love to. Everyone says, well, I think the majority think Hot Fuzz is the best out of the 3.
I don't know. I got the most feel from At World's End, in all honesty.
I like Hot Fuzz the most, yeah.
I have most fun with Shaun of the Dead, but I think that I felt the most in At World's End. Because I very much identify with when Simon Pegg was at the end and he was at the world's end and he was pouring his last pint, because the movie's about a group of friends who got together who never got to finish this pub crawl of having a drink at each of the bars that lead up to the world's end pub. And they get back together when they're older. Simon Pegg is kind of like Ed from Shaun of the Dead in that he never really grew up. And he feels at the end like this is the only thing he has left in his life, because he never really made anything of himself, and that was the best time of his life, and that and he was holding on to a time in his life that had long passed, and he felt like he had nothing else to live for. And when he broke down, I was halfway about to cry. I was like, man, that's really sad, because I get that.
I've said to my friends, because that film's become a drink movie with us, we'd watch it while drinking, which is not the emphasis of the film, despite the fact that a lot of drinking happens in it. And I said to them many times that that's his Oscar-winning performance. I think Simon Pegg doing Gary King is his best performance, and it's phenomenal. And the only thing it's probably overlooked is because it's a comedy performance, but it's so, the emotions are so, I connect with them so powerfully. I think, what you're saying is right. He's a person that's trapped. He lived this high life in high school, and then the moment high school ends and reality kicks in and he has to be an adult, he's like, the reality of the world comes upon him, and realizes that it's not going to be as cushy as the sort of bubble that is high school. And I really connected with that, and as a person, so I find that's why I connect to a lot, because I'm the type of person that used to be someone who was very much locked in on the nostalgia of what it was like being in high school with my friends, and thankfully met my wife, and do no longer think that way. There are better things to be had every day. But
I think we all kind of feel like that at some point, but you eventually grow out of it. Well, you kind of have to like be a functioning member of society.
But Gary doesn't.
Yeah,
because he's not functioning.
To the point where Nick Frost's character is like having to try to drag him away. It's what he said when he was grabbing Simon Pegg's character, and you hear Simon Pegg yelling, "I need this! I need this!"
Yeah, I've got nothing else.
I've got nothing else. I need this. I was like,
that hits me hard. Right. So it's a great film. I think it's a perfect cap off to the trilogy, and I think it's got a lot of the feels, but I can understand why it's perhaps not perceived as funny, because the beginning of the film doesn't have as many jokes as, say, Hot Fuzz does, which has like a joke a minute. There's and I love Hot Fuzz too. I think all 3 films are in my top 10 films of all time.
Edgar Wright has a great way of blending comedy and seriousness, because there'll be moments where you're laughing your ass off, but then in Shaun of the Dead too, where it gets serious and you're like, wow, where we're laughing just a second ago, but that's another reason why you like these characters, is because they can be funny but relatable, and you can understand when they feel sad, you could feel sad. When when they give him the gun and his mom, and he sees his mom is infected, and
that one was rough.
It's really rough, and it sort of surprises you that it's in this film, and it's a testament to the actors as well that they can do these performances. But it hits really hard, and it hits every time. Shaun, the death of Shaun's mum, and so it does. That's kind of the thing. It's like it's a comedy, certainly is, but it's not a parody. It doesn't. It's not silly. It takes itself seriously, so it takes the emotions of its characters seriously, which is always something I liked about it, and it's always something that made it stand out amongst the other films that came out afterwards that were kind of like, oh, we'll just throw werewolves and a bit of comedy in, and everyone will watch it because it's like Shaun of the Dead. But no other film has come close to what those 3 have done.
I'm glad that it remained a trilogy, and I'd rather something good stay like a trilogy rather than becoming an ongoing thing that just gets too repetitive and too tiresome.
I do think they're going to do something together again, but I don't think it will be in the confines of, they have to have the cornetto joke, they have to have the jump over the fence joke, and they have to have.
That's what I mean. Like that, that trilogy is a great, trilogy all on its own. I mean, I don't mind. I certainly don't mind Edgar Wright, Nick Frost, and Simon Pegg teaming up again. I would love to see that. But I like those three movies just kind of being their little own standalone thing. No need to improve on it. No need to add anything to it. They stand great as a trilogy.
They do, and as I said, I'm a big Edgar Wright fan, and I'm a big Simon Pegg, Nick Frost fan. But seeing seeing Paul, which is a film Simon Pegg and Nick Frost wrote together, but it's not involved in any way with Edgar Wright, and then seeing Zach Pilgrim versus the World, which is a film Edgar Wright directed without any assistance from them, it's really interesting because their elements aren't there. They're just you get to see. You get to see how fantastic Edgar Wright's directing skills are, which you saw at the beginning of the Shaun of the Dead, which I didn't mention, but the way that he shifts the cameras around in the pub scene at the very beginning makes you realize this is actually a director of quite a bit of talent. Mm-hmm. He's not just sort of resting the camera and just recording it from a wide point of view. He's giving you all these different angles and makes the camera movements funny with the sound effects and all
a lot of zoom ins.
Yeah.
What an outing for Simon Pegg and Nick Frost as like their first big movie. And I know it was a big hit over here, just a big breakout hit that really made them a household name there. Everybody knew Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, that duo, to the point when Hot Fuzz came out, everyone was like, oh, the Shaun of the Dead guys. Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah.
I remember going to see Hot Fuzz and being like with my friend, I went to see it with my friend Keith, and like, do you think it will be able to hit the standard? Because not many films not many people can recreate that magic. And I feel like Hot Fuzz surpasses Shaun of the Dead in some ways in terms of its
I think it did box office wise too.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that it's not Hot Fuzz on its own doesn't have a female romance. Mm-hmm. I hate stories that feel like they have to wedge in a romantic story, and it kind of feels very sort of.
Come to think of it, it doesn't. Maybe that's another reason why it's so refreshing, because a lot of movies get bogged down with if you have a female lead and a male lead, they have to end up together just because they're the two leads, and it's like no, you could have them.
Well, it was kind of replaced with like the budding bromance between Simon Pegg and Nick Frost.
Absolutely,
and, like, their relationship of the film.
Yeah. I guess the same way was at World's End too. I guess there wasn't a romance. Wait, was there? I forgot.
It was your girl. It was Rosemary. It was between one of the friends. I can't remember his name. He's played by Paddy Constantine. But
I don't even remember the movie for that though.
No, you don't. You don't. And I kind of like that. It's kind of refreshing that they kept those. We did it once because Shaun of the Dead so heavy emphasis on the fact that Sean and Liz and they're kind of a crux of a thing. Yeah. But they don't force it in with Hot Fuzz, which I really like.
I like that they made Liz likable too.
You completely understand where Liz comes from.
Yes, you can understand. A lot of rom-coms fall like in that the lead character kind of overshadows their romantic interests, sometimes to the point where you don't even like the romantic interest. Yeah, especially because she did the dumping.
Yes.
Yeah. But as you're sitting there and you're like, no, this guy doesn't have his life together. You can completely understand why she
kind of agree with her.
She put it out on the table and say, hey, look, I need to move on with my life here. I need to get something going. And he's constantly promising her he'll change. And then they end up at the very end, they just go back to doing the same thing. They're a couple, but then they back to the Winchester again.
They do live together at the end, which they didn't do.
Yeah.
But it's like I don't know how long they were together, but they've been together for years in the film. Mm-hmm. But this idea that she's never met his mum, which is hilarious. And
I think it was the film takes place. I think it's a week after their 3-year anniversary.
Yeah,
is when
because I think they said they met in Greece like 2 years ago.
Met in Greece 2 years ago, and it's like we went on holiday to Greece, and they're like we met in Greece and at a rave, and all this stuff, and it's sort of like he just functions at this level, this sort of rut level where this is the comfortability I live in, and I don't exist. I don't want to go any further than that, which is very interesting, and it's sort of the malaise of modern living. It's kind of sending up, and I understand. I find it very interesting. There's cycles that people get onto and sort of places in their life where they feel like they can't get out of. They don't even think to get out of them, and I think that's Sean's problem. He doesn't have any problem with where he is in his life, but everyone else does.
Did Edgar Wright do any other horror movies?
Well, the new one apparently is a horror movie, Last Night in Soho.
All right. Well, how about next time you come on, we'll talk about Last Night in Soho. We'll do a Last Night in Soho review.
Sounds good. He did a 1 minute and a half trailer for Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez's double feature, which was called Don't. And the trailer's a horror trailer for a film that's never going to be made. It's really cool. It's got some really cool actors in it, and it's really fantastic effects. And it's on YouTube. Watch it. It's great. It's the film you want to see, but you can't see it because it's never going to make it.
It's the best film you'll never be able to see.
Right.
Yeah.
Funny story about Hot Fuzz. I tried to go sneak in to see that movie in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
And got caught and had to end up watching a movie called The Invisible, which was have y'all ever seen that?
No.
There's a reason. I wish I didn't. It was a melodramatic thing about a guy who died. I mean, the premise sounds interesting. The guy died and he's kind of semi-dead. And his spirit is kind of in this thing where only one girl can see him, and he's trying to lead her to his body.
Yeah.
Which sounds interesting, but God, that was a boring movie. Especially knowing that I could have been watching Hot Fuzz.
Yeah.
Because I got caught by the usher people. Because the way I did it was I bought a ticket for The Invisible, and then I was going to be like, all right, this starts around roughly the same time as Hot Fuzz. So let me get these two tickets, get into the theater, and then figure out which theater Hot Fuzz is playing in, and then just go into that theater. And I went right when I should have went left because the Hot Fuzz was on the complete opposite side of the theater, and the attendants were looking at us, obviously not knowing where, like looking around, trying to figure out, all right, where is can we help you? Where's your ticket? And they're like, oh, your movie theater's right here. And I'm like, oh, yeah, thank you. And so then we ended up having it, which sucked because I had snuck in and saw Hot Fuzz earlier, but this time I was going to go see it with a friend, so I knew exactly what I was missing.
Yeah, you knew how good it was.
Yeah.
As best film that came out that year, I remember that, for example. That was my feeling on it when I watched it. The interesting thing about there is sort of horror elements in it. The whole sort of society that's in Hot Fuzz, it's like a cult. The bit where he gets, and meets them and they keep saying greater good, even though it's funny, it's also kind of creepy.
Yeah.
That's supposed to be like a reference to another movie, but I don't know what. But
well, I feel it's a very Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which we already talked about, but I find it's very like all these people acting sort of brain dead and kind of hypnotized.
I just love how he had like this whole motive and plan laid out for why they were doing it. We're like, no, these people are just ruining the town.
Yeah, I do love that. It's great.
There's no real big. The fact that you have this giant conspiracy and underground people of murderers because they want to win the Town of the Year award.
Yes, and it's interesting because it's mentioned at the very beginning of the film by like one of the chief inspectors that sends Nicholas there, and he just says it in a flippant comment. It's won it so many times because it doesn't matter to them, because it only matters to the people that are killing all these people in the film, which is very interesting. It's a great film, but it's all set up in the moment where the chief inspector, he says, you can't make people disappear, and he replies, I can, I'm the chief inspector. And that's the whole film in one thing. You get it at the very beginning, but it works. Apparently they had the script for both sides, so if you chose to believe in the conspiracy that Nicholas Angel, that works, like legitimately. If you write it out, it all works, because the idea was that Agatha Christie like plot. We have two side by side stories working on.
The funny thing about this trilogy of movies is that it's hilarious, and you're sitting there laughing for a good like 30 minutes of the movie, 30-40 minutes, and then something happens that reminds you, oh yeah, this is a rated R movie. That I remember that the scene in Hot Fuzz was when that giant spear thing from the top of that building fell and crushed that dude's head and caved his skull, and all the blood and gore in that, and it's so over the top and violent that you're like, oh, that's right. This is the same guy who did Shaun of the Dead, and that had a guy get torn apart in the movie at the very end. The David got ripped apart. I was like, oh yeah, this is a zombie movie. It's class. So, and all the wee in jokes and stuff that are peppered throughout, like a traffic collision. The reason why they have to keep saying it's a collision, not an accident.
Because accident, there's no one to blame. And, it's really, it's so smart. It's such a smart film. Again, they take themselves seriously. It's not jokes for jokes' sake. It's all intelligent.
That's why it should never be a drinking game to like drink for every time there's like all the in jokes that get repeated, because you will be on the floor by the end of the movie.
Try drinking during on World's End, every time they took a sip of a pint, we had to take a shot. And
you took shots every time they took sips.
Yes.
Oh, you guys are Irish.
That was the Irish and Scottish crowd, so yeah, we were,
I thought mine used to be back in the day. The movie Beer Fest used to be my friends and I
love that movie.
I haven't seen that. I don't even know. I've never heard of that. What's that?
Oh, you never heard Beer Fest? That's pretty fun. That's a fun little drinking one. It's all about you've heard of Oktoberfest?
Yeah.
Oktoberfest is like the kiddie pool compared to Beer Fest. Beer Fest is where the big boys go and have all their drinking. They play the quarters. It is like the X Games of drinking, basically.
Yeah. Have you ever seen Super Troopers?
It's the same people.
Same cast.
Okay. Oh, right. So that's theirs. Oh,
it's Broken Lizard?
Yeah, Broken Lizard. They had Club Dread, Beer Fest, and Super Troopers.
To the point where at the very beginning of Beer Fest, they had to put a disclaimer and said, if you consume the amount of alcohol that these guys are drinking, like in this movie, you will die.
Yeah.
That's good.
He says that's good. It's like, oh, nice little warning. You and your warnings.
Well, I don't know. There may be something there is true to the whole sort of stereotype that Irish people like to drink.
I was just joking.
Because when I went out with my Scottish friends were like, you're Irish, so this is the first time we've ever had you out. We're going to pay for everything you drink, and we're going to see how much you can drink. Mm-hmm. And I think £175 was spent in my tab at the end of the night, and they were on the floor.
Which either at the very end of the day, even if you only drank like a couple of drinks, or whatever, they still paid for your drinks.
Yeah, why would I not say that? But at the end of the night, they were on the floor, and I was still standing. So Irish won there against the Scottish.
I was trying to do everything I can to not like delve into like Irish stereotypes, but then you sent that message saying, "All right, we'll be talking about Shaun of the Dead. I'll be on the whiskey."
Yeah, so I did think I thought we were going to be starting at 8, so I didn't have the chance to prepare my drink. So
that's what we kind of figured, that it was probably like the time difference is probably just a little bit off.
Mm-hmm. But the one thing I wanted to say about Shaun of the Dead that's interesting, I find it interesting, is there's a bit in it where they flick through channels and they're offering all these explanations for why the zombie.
I like that one.
Yeah. And they reference rage viruses, which is 28 Days Later. They reference a comet, which is the Night of the Living Dead series, and some people say it's just the Rapture. But then it switched off, and you're never given the definite answer why it happens. And the reason I think that is because all the zombie films that come out tend to fall into this story hole of trying to explain why, whereas Shaun of the Dead just says, by switching off that TV, says we're not about this. Mm-hmm. We're about Nick, we're about Simon.
The why is not the story here.
Exactly. It's about these slackers and seeing what they're going to do. The bit where they decide the best course of action is to pretend to be a zombie and walk through a crowd of zombies, and that's the best thing. And nobody questions like why it works. It just does. Yeah.
That's what I get bogged down in my writing, is that I feel like I have to explain everything, but it's like, no, you don't have to explain everything. Just find out what's important to the story and just stick with that.
Yeah. Like there is a real there's certain stories like Alfie and the Dead Girls, which is part of my collection, and that's a very sort of close to the reality as you can write, interpretation of what would happen in that situation. So that's why I try to keep it back. But I get bogged down. I think the older you get, the more your imagination wilts, and the more you sort of realize, you think about situations as, what if that really happened? What would, and think, no, it doesn't matter what really happened because it's a fiction. Yeah, you can do whatever you want to do.
If people are willing to suspend their disbelief at this point, then just keep going with it. They're already reading a fictional book. So,
have either of you read the Trick or Treat story? Because I could say something about that, but it would spoil it.
I didn't even got to that one.
Not yet. That was one, since it's near the beginning, that I usually probably end up being one of the last ones I read.
Yeah. All right. Well, I can spoil it if you want.
Spoil it. Go ahead. I'll read it anyway.
Yeah. Well, the premise of one of the premises of Trick or Treat, one of the things that features in it is it's about a monster that needs to be invited in, a vampire that knocks on your door and needs to be invited in, and does so. But the woman that is in the house, the main character, Jane Conway, it's all set up in a realistic way that even though this thing is a supernatural entity that shouldn't exist but does for the context of this story, her reaction to it is all very much in sort of the kind of as grounded as you could possibly think to be. So it's a nice sort of contrast, I think, for that story, in that the reaction that the main character has to this creature is very much based in realism, and I think there's sort of an interesting thing in that story where the of practical way she goes about kicking its ass. I think it just works, and I think so. Having sometimes being completely balls to the wall, imaginative in fiction works, and sometimes that sort of practical kind of grounded realism also has a really good purpose and a really good effect on something really weird. Hang on a sec, because I think it's very spooky to have like one thing in your story that's just like out there and really subvertive and really sort of strange, like the existence of a vampire, but everything else around it is just normality, and that's the kind of freaky thing about it.
Because you need to have very much like the straight. It's like having the straight man in the movie that the eccentric character seems more eccentric off of. Because you need to have that normalcy, so that the fantastic seems more fantastic.
Yeah, like Nick Frost's character in The World's End, he's very much a straight man compared to Simon, who's now allowed to be like this boisterous drunk character, that he is in the film, which is a different thing for Nick Frost, which I really like seeing him as in that film.
I like to think that Simon Pegg character was Shaun if the zombie apocalypse never happened and he still broke up with Liz and he just hung out with Ed for the rest of his life. That's probably how he would have turned out.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah,
I imagine the same thing.
Yeah.
All right, so I got two questions real quick. One is random and one is to bring it around. During that scene where they were, where he was flipping through the channels, do you know who or what that song was and who it was sung by when it was singing Panic on the Streets of London?
It's a Morrissey song.
It's a Morrissey song. All right.
I think it's the Smiths.
Okay. And I was going to go ahead and bring it around to Kills there, Dave.
I just have one question. It's kind of about UK horror. What's like a UK horror that people out in the States might not know about, but probably should watch?
UK horror film?
Yeah. Like, I'm a big fan of the film Foxtrap that came out in like 2015. I found that on Shudder, but I know a lot of people out here don't watch UK films.
Why do you think that is? Because we watch everything of yours.
I don't know.
I already embarrassed myself by mentioning those movies earlier and saying they were UK films, and he's like, yeah, but they were Warner Brothers. I was like, well,
I don't know. Like, I enjoy a lot of like the UK stuff. Like
Danny Boyle, a lot of Danny Boyle stuff, like has a lot of very, in the same way that horror sort of pushes the boundaries of comfortability, like Sunshine, which is a sci-fi thing, which is all set in space. It's a fantastic film. Trance is another film of his. It's a later film that probably doesn't get much respect that it deserves, but I really like it. It's kind
of like
Trainspotting.
Train Spotting?
I haven't seen Trainspotting.
Trainspotting's pretty good. It has it has Robert Carlyle and I think James McAvoy.
I think Ewan McGregor.
I always get those two mixed up. Ewan McGregor's and it's all about heroin and all that business. It was a pretty good movie. I recommend it.
You asked for the first thing that came to mind was Dog Soldiers. It's a UK horror film. It's set in the Glens of Scotland, and it's about this SAS group that are on training, and so they're training, so they don't have live ammunition, but they have to parachute into these glens. And there's another team that's supposed to be there, and they're ready to find them, and they're ripped to shreds, which they're not supposed to be because it's just. And it's in the vein of Shaun of the Dead, but it doesn't have the comedy.
It's called Dog Soldiers.
Dog Soldiers.
I want to see what that was up. Yeah,
I liked it. I thought it was good.
Good. Yeah.
So you want us to go ahead and bring it around to Kills there, Dave?
Yeah.
How about instead of, because at the end we usually like to talk about the kill of the movie. What was your favorite kill? What was your favorite death in the movie? How about we don't do kill of the movie just specifically for Shaun of the Dead, but how about for the entire Edgar Wright trilogy? Is there a death that was like really cool to you?
You've already mentioned the guy that gets the church tower spike in his head is a really cool death.
Yeah.
So it is. In Shaun of the Dead, it's got to be David being torn to pieces.
Oh, yeah. Because I think everybody was like, oh, good, that guy's out of here.
Right. So there's another great death in that film. It's maybe not as good, but we never mentioned in Shaun of the Dead, there's 3 flatmates, and there's another guy who's got his life sorted out. And he's very
feet.
He turns into a zombie, and when they kill him with the shot to the face, that is a fantastic death.
Pete was also another one where it's like they paint him as an asshole, but it's like, yeah, but come on now. I mean, a lot of what he's saying is justified. Right. Nick Frost's character is living there pretty much rent free, doesn't do any of the housework, and refuses to get a job. And he's playing loud music and leaving the door open, not taking down messages, leaving the house a wreck.
Yeah,
you can understand why he's angry.
You can. I can't think of one in The World's End. I can't think of a death. Because some of them, a lot of them happen off screen.
What about you there, Dave? I'd say mine's probably that spike to the head, just because it was just completely blatant and reminded me of it was a rated R movie when I was, everyone's laughing and then it just.
Well, mine is what I thought was going to be a death, but evidently the guy survived. When he shot the bear trap and it landed on the guy's face.
Yeah, all those guys survived. All those people survived, which I thought was hilarious.
Even though it wasn't a kill, but I still love that part. I just didn't see that one coming. Yeah. As
violent as Shaun of the Dead was when he did all of that stuff, Angel didn't kill anybody. Well, maybe with the landmine at the end, but maybe I think that dude probably died. But
that was an accident. That wasn't him.
He tripped over it and landed on it.
Yeah. As far as Nick was concerned, he thought that was a dud, remember? So he didn't think it was.
But
working.
He himself didn't kill anybody. Everybody just got horribly maimed.
Right.
But thanks again for recommending this one. I hadn't seen Shaun of the Dead in a long time. I was happy to remind myself not only that Shaun of the Dead exists, but so did the rest of the trilogy.
Yeah,
that's a good watch.
Great. So his Baby Driver, all that stuff, it's all great. So I don't think he's done a bad film.
Edgar Wright's really good.
And you have to come on the show at least again so we can talk about Last Night in Soho.
Yeah, I'd be up for that.
All right.
If anything, we have an opening coming up in a couple of weeks since...
well, we got Thomas Gloom next week, that's for sure.
Thomas Gloom next week.
Yeah.
I guess that wraps it up here at the Body Bag Podcast. I'd like to thank our special guest again, Jamie Stewart, for being here on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, man.
And we hope to see him again. And everybody, go check him out. You want to give your social one more time so they can find you?
Jamie.stewart.33 on IG. You'll be able to find any of my writing stuff that I'm currently promoting or going to put out. There's going to be stuff coming next year, quite a bit, hopefully.
And in the meantime, if it's already starting to be Christmassy over in your area, just, bunker down for the next 2.5 months because it's going to be nothing but Christmas music. Or at least over here in the States, it's going to be.
Right.
Yeah.
The second, I don't know, because this drops the week after Halloween, so probably by this time, it'll only be 2 days after Halloween. I guarantee you they'll be doing Christmas music in my area.
Oh, they've already got Christmas stuff in the shops here.
Yeah, same here. All I Want for Christmas by Mariah Carey is going to be playing everywhere.
Everywhere. Yep. This is the season where Mariah Carey makes her money. Mm-hmm. So, but in the meantime, I've been Chris Thomas.
Broke Rider Dave here.
And thanks again, Jamie.
Thank you.